SpaceX is reportedly prepping to build what could become a $100 billion Starship complex on 125,000 acres in Louisiana. And when I first saw this story, I didn't immediately think, oh, wow, that's great for Louisiana. Of course it is. But my first thought was, what is Detroit doing to get a piece of this industry? Now, before somebody gets into the comments talking about, Eddie, they're not launching rockets from Detroit. I understand, right? We're probably not putting a Starship launch pad next to the Renaissance Center and firing rockets over Canada, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something much, much bigger. Because if SpaceX is serious about eventually launching rockets at a scale we've never seen before, somebody has to manufacture the components, right? Somebody has to build the satellites. Somebody has to make the robotics, the electronics, the tooling, the ground equipment, right? The advanced materials, and all of the thousands of pieces that make this industry work. And there are very few places in America that understand how to build complicated machines at a scale better than Detroit, right? We put America on wheels, right? We became the arsenal of democracy. So maybe our leaders need to start asking, could Detroit help put America in space, right? Because while we're talking about EVs, batteries, AI, data centers, right, all that good stuff, I believe space needs to become one of the next industries Detroit and Michigan aggressively pursue, right? Let's talk about it.
What if you built 12 launch pads right next to each other? Well, that is what SpaceX is wanting to do out there in Louisiana. And this marshland, it is set to turn into some of the biggest rocket hangars humanity has ever seen. Here's Elon Musk dropping by from a chopper.
What do you think?
Great. Yeah, it seems perfect. If you want to go out there and make life multiplanetary and not just be a tourist, send a few people and come back. And if you want to go there and actually build a self-growing civilization, you need serious tonnage.
Serious tonnage. And here is the vision. Launch pads galore, self-sustaining, generating its own power. SpaceX says construction is going to start next year with the goal of launching its first Starship in 2029. 30 rockets, possibly daily by 2030. Let's bring in space journalist and host of The Endless Void, Kristen Fisher. Kristen, great to see you. First of all, serious tonnage is right. Like so much so that I don't know if people realize just how much tonnage he's talking about here. What do you think?
I don't think they do either. I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around, even for people like you and me who follow this closely. The best way that I've found to kind of put this in perspective, Gotti, is up until this point in all of human history, all of humanity has only put about 20,000 tons of stuff into orbit. What Elon Musk and SpaceX are trying to do is put more than 1 million tons of stuff into space in 1 year alone. I mean, that is what is at stake here. And that is what SpaceX thinks it can do, not just with this rocket, Starship, the biggest, most powerful rocket ever built, but with this new announcement today, $100 billion to buy 125,000 acres of land in Louisiana. That's what today is all about.
First of all, let's forget about the cool rocket ships for a second. Let's look at the scale of the investment, right? That's what caught my attention, because I think people still hear space industry and think NASA, right? Astronauts, moon landings, science experiments, but that's not really what we're talking about anymore. Space is becoming an entire industry, right? And once something becomes an industry, an entire economy starts developing around it. Manufacturing, engineering, construction, software, robotics, energy, telecommunications, logistics, advanced materials, satellites, testing, research, supply chains. That's what Detroit needs to be looking at. Now, they're talking about moving enormous amounts of material into orbit, and whether SpaceX hits every one of these numbers exactly isn't really the point. Look at the direction we're headed, right? Reusable rockets, lower launch costs, more satellites, more launches, more private investment, more infrastructure. And historically, when transportation becomes cheaper and more accessible, economic activity follows it, right? We saw it with railroads, automobiles, airplanes, container shipping, right? And we might be witnessing the early stages of that same thing happening with space. So Detroit's question shouldn't be, how do we get to Mars? Detroit's question should be, what can we manufacture for the companies that are going? That's the economic development opportunity. But once again, Detroit doesn't need a rocket launch pad, right? Louisiana has something we don't have, the Gulf of Mexico, right? Florida has the Atlantic, Texas has the Gulf. You need enormous safety zones and launch trajectories that don't send rockets over major population centers. But here's where I think cities can completely misunderstand this opportunity. The launch pad is only one piece of the space economy. Think about automobiles. Every company involved in the automotive industry doesn't manufacture an entire car. One company makes seats, another makes glass, one makes sensors, one makes transmissions, another manufactures tooling, another writes software, right? Somebody handles logistics, tests parts, somebody designs manufacturing systems. Thousands of companies participate in producing one vehicle. Detroit understands that ecosystem better than almost anywhere in the world. So why couldn't we apply the same model to space? We're not actually starting from scratch. Michigan already has hundreds of aerospace related companies. We have one of America's deepest advanced manufacturing workforces. We have an enormous concentration of mechanical, electrical, and industrial engineering talent. And think about what SpaceX and the larger aerospace industry need, right? Precision manufacturing, engineering, machining, robotics, automation, advanced materials, electronics, tool and die, quality control, high volume manufacturing, supply chain management, right? Does any of that sound familiar, right? That's Southeast Michigan, right? We spent more than 100 years learning how to manufacture incredibly complicated machines at enormous scale, right? That's an asset. And we need to stop thinking that that asset can only be used for automobiles. There are already Michigan manufacturers publicly identifying themselves as SpaceX suppliers, right? So when I'm saying Michigan should get into SpaceX supply chain, this isn't some hypothetical idea. We're already in it. The question is, how do we go from having some Michigan suppliers involved to intentionally building a space manufacturing ecosystem here, right? That's an economic development strategy.
I mean, the scale of that is, again, it's wild. If you've ever seen one of these rockets up close and personal, like you're just like, how did humans even come up with this? And then the idea of 12 hangars all next to each other. And then the idea of not just in Louisiana, right? Expanding spaceports all across the country. Realistically, like what kind of timelines do you think we're looking at here? Because there is a lot of hype, there is a lot of promise, and yet then there's a lot of engineering and like actually building the infrastructure.
There is, and remember, this comes on the heels of the Trump White House's executive order just a few days ago saying that they wanted the United States to have 1,000+ launches a year by 2030. And, you know, you think about what the United States was capable of doing just this past year in 2025, they were only able to do about 180 launches. And SpaceX was responsible for the vast majority of them. So to get to that cadence, 1,000 launches in a year, it's going to take something as big and grand as what SpaceX just announced today. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is, you know, you look at Starbase in Texas, right? Which is the only place, the only operational launch pad for Starship right now. Starbase in Texas, which used to be Boca Chica, Texas, is only about 350 acres. 350 acres. This Louisiana Starbase is 125,000 acres. I mean, if they can do what they've already done with 350 acres, imagine what they're going to be able to do with this massive new facility.
I mean, listen to these numbers, right? 125,000 acres, potentially $100 billion investment. Think beyond SpaceX itself, right? Think about what develops around something that large: construction companies, suppliers, engineers, infrastructure contractors, housing, hotels, restaurants, transportation, warehouses, research facilities, training centers, right? That's why states fight so aggressively over these projects. You're not simply landing a company, you're potentially landing an economic ecosystem. And somebody in Louisiana was doing the work necessary to put their state in position for this opportunity long before this announcement became a headline. That's economic development, once again, which leads me to a very important question that I have for the leaders of this great city of Detroit. Who's calling SpaceX, right? Who at the city of Detroit, MEDC, DEGC, or the state is sitting down with companies like SpaceX and asking, what do you need from Michigan to manufacture parts for your industry, for your company? What are their supply chain bottlenecks, right? What components are difficult to produce? What capabilities could Michigan automotive suppliers transition into? What could our robotics companies build, right? What could our tool and die companies manufacture? What could our engineering firms design? What could Michigan universities research, right? What could we manufacture here and ship to Louisiana, Texas, or Florida? And don't stop at SpaceX, right? What does Blue Origin need, right? What does Rocket Lab need? What does the satellite industry need? What does the Space Force need, right? What does the Department of Defense need? Those conversations need to happen before everybody realizes how big this industry will become. Because once an ecosystem is established somewhere else, getting companies to leave becomes a lot harder. Now, with all that said, I want to give Michigan some credit here because we're not completely ignoring this. Michigan has already developed a defense and aerospace strategy that includes growing the state's space economy, right? There's also the Michigan Launch Initiative, right? That includes discussions around a horizontal launch location in Ascota, potential vertical launch infrastructure in the UP, and command and control operations in northern Michigan. So Michigan is already thinking about space. My argument is go bigger and connect that strategy much more aggressively to Detroit and Southeast Michigan, right? Northern Michigan may offer geography for certain launch and testing operations. Southeast Michigan provides the manufacturing ecosystem. Put those together and suddenly Michigan has a much more interesting pitch. And I actually think Detroit has a really good pitch, right? It's simple. You know how to design rockets. We know how to industrialize complicated machines, right? That's our history. America needed automobiles manufactured at scale. Detroit did it. America needed tanks, aircraft engines, military equipment during World War II. Detroit became the arsenal of democracy. America is now entering another industrial competition: AI, autonomy, robotics, defense, advanced manufacturing, and space, right? Maybe the next version of Detroit is arsenal of democracy to arsenal of space, right? It sounds dramatic, but manufacturing is what we do. But the auto industry is changing, right? EVs are changing supply chains. Automation is changing factories. Software is changing where value exists inside vehicles. Global competition is getting tougher, right? Some Michigan automotive suppliers are going to need diversity. If I own an advanced manufacturing company in Southeast Michigan, I'm asking, can we manufacture satellite structures, right? Can we machine aerospace components, right? Can we build thermal systems? Can we produce wiring harnesses? Can we make tooling? Can we manufacture ground support equipment? Can we enter defense manufacturing? That's not abandoning automotive. That's using the capabilities automotive gave us to participate in the industries growing around us, right? Detroit cannot fully depend on one industry forever. Now, here's one thing I'm very passionate about, right? Imagine what this could mean for young Detroiters. Imagine high school students being introduced not only to automotive careers, but aerospace manufacturing, satellite technology, robotics, autonomous systems, right? Precision manufacturing, space communications. And this isn't just about producing rocket scientists, right? The industry needs electricians, welders, machinists, technicians, CNC operators, fabricators, construction workers, software developers, quality control specialists, engineers, project managers. There could be a whole middle-class workforce economy surrounding space, right? That's why this needs to become a Detroit conversation. Now, because this is Flux City, let's understand what all of this means from a development standpoint. A space manufacturing cluster doesn't just mean factories, right? You will eventually need industrial buildings, research facilities, warehouses, training centers, office space, hotels, housing, restaurants, infrastructure, right? That's why massive industrial investments have such a large ripple effect, right? One major employer or one entire industry cluster can reshape the real estate market surrounding it. That's what automotive manufacturing did to this region. And that's why I think we need to be very intentional about what the next industrial ecosystem here in Detroit could be. Now, when I look at this announcement, I don't just see rockets. I see industrial policy, manufacturing, infrastructure, economic development, workforce development, real estate development, and potentially one of the major industries over the next 50 years. Detroit has reinvented itself before, right? We became the automotive capital of the world. We became the arsenal of democracy. And now we're trying to figure out Detroit's place in the economy of the 21st century. Automotive will always matter, but our future can't only be cars. It needs to include mobility, defense, robotics, AI, advanced manufacturing, and space, right? And so, to our mayor, to our governor, MEDC, DEGC, Wayne County, Oakland County, Macomb County, right? Our universities, our manufacturers, our developers, right? Start making the calls. Call SpaceX, call the satellite companies, call aerospace suppliers, call defense contractors, call the Space Force, right? And ask one simple question. What do you need that Michigan can build? Because maybe SpaceX never launches a rocket from Detroit, and that's fine. Detroit doesn't need to launch a rocket, right? Detroit needs to help build it. And if space becomes one of America's next great industrial revolutions, I want Detroit to eventually be able to look at what's flying above our heads and say, look, we helped build that too. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And Elon, if you somehow come across this video, I want to make a direct pitch to you and your team. Take a serious look at Detroit and Southeast Michigan as part of SpaceX's future expansion. Maybe Detroit isn't where you launch Starship, right? But it could absolutely be a place where you manufacture, engineer, test, assemble, or build parts of the ecosystem that supports it, right? We have the manufacturing history. We have the engineering talent. We have the suppliers. We have the industrial infrastructure. And we have a region that understands what it means to build complex machines at scale. So if SpaceX is looking for additional manufacturing, research, engineering, satellite, logistics, or supplier opportunities, I'd personally love to help facilitate that conversation and help connect the right people on the ground here in the city of Detroit and across Michigan, right? I'm serious about that. And if there is a real opportunity for SpaceX to have a larger presence here, I would gladly help bring together developers, manufacturers, state and local leadership, economic development organizations, property owners, and whoever else needs to be at the table, right? Detroit helped build the industrial America of the last century. And I think we'd love the opportunity to help build the next one. Elon, come take a look at Detroit. Let me show you around. Let's see what we can build together. I'll see you guys in the next one.